Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of Data Analytics and AI podcast, the show for thought leaders and business professionals. Today, we'll discuss the state of data analytics and AI in the current world, the journey so far, and also what lies ahead. We'll also try and take a sneak peek into the functional applications into various industry domains. My name is Gaurav Pudar. I'm the AVP of Global Client Partner at Fluid Systems. And we have Kumar Belur, who is the VP of Data, Enterprise Integration, and AI. So before we start talking about the interesting topics today, Kumar, you have about 25 years of experience in this industry. Why don't we start with a brief background and journey for you so far?
Hey, Gaurav, nice to be chatting with you. Thanks for that introduction. There's a lot of I in my title, EI and AI, and we'll get into that. So good to be on the call with everyone watching us. Definitely, there's been a lot of profound transformation that's been happening in the last few decades in the data modernization journey. Especially if you look into it, the evolution of the internet and the cloud computing and with the AI. What it took almost 30 years since the release of Mosaic, browser and the internet, with the evolution of the Yahoo and Google. And then came the cloud computing almost like 15 to 17 years ago, right? And that is more of a mature platform right now. Similarly, in the last year plus since the release of ChatGPT, there has been so much of interest and transformation that's happening in the AI space. But if you look into it, each one of these technology platforms, from the ATXT world that we got introduced back in the 80s, to the internet, to the cloud computing, to the AI, each one of these platforms has been a stepping stone for each other for growth, right? It's almost like, these platforms was like, boasting for the next evolution of the technology. And here we are with the AI. And of course, without cloud computing, there's no AI. And, without internet, there's no cloud computing. And without the X's and the ATs, there's no kind of the internet, right? So that's kind of the progressive, changes that we have seen in the industry with regards to technology innovation. But most importantly, on the AI space, the growth has been more exponential, right? And we're all so excited, and it's so difficult to keep up with those changes that's happening in the AI too. And we're going to be talking about some of those things and how it makes an impact and change to the industries, and also the day-to-day lives on the IT side as well. So looking forward to those conversations with you.
Thank you, Kumar. This kind of leads into my first point that I wanted to touch upon. Whenever we talk about any rapid growth or drastic innovation and development in this world, we tend to first think about industrial revolution. So during that industrial revolution period, the amount of growth that humankind witnessed in a few decades, that was more than what was achieved in a few centuries before that, right? And in early 20th century, we started seeing the age of computers, the age of digital revolution. That kind of leads into the age of information, right? Today, it seems like the society is at a crossroads of technology and culture using AI. Do you think this AI revolution is going to be as big or as drastic as compared to the industrial revolution?
It's a great question. And in fact, the answer is yes. In fact, it's going to be even more exponential than anybody can think of it, right? And that's kind of the progressive change that we have seen in the last 12 plus months since ChatGPT release 1, right? And if you look into it, we are at ChatGPT 4.0 and they're talking about 5, and of course the names are going to be changing as well, right? That's an exponential advancement in the AI space compared to if you look into any of those industrial evolution that you're talking about, or even in the space research, right? Since the first day we went to the moon, and how long it took, for us to go to the moon or land on the moon the next time, right? But that's not what we are seeing in the AI space. This is all exponential. Number one, the reason being is most of the development is also open source, right? That is a lot of significant involvement, across the globe both countries participating in it, both at the government level as well as like at the commercial levels who's contributing to that, right? And as I mentioned, the technology evolution of the internet to the cloud computing also kind of like plays a key role in terms of setting up the stage and the foundation for that exponential growth. So we are actually sitting at the tip of the iceberg, right, in terms of the evolution that's taking place. And we have a great infrastructure coming from NVIDIA and also like, most of the hardware, manufacturers investing more into the GPUs, right? That kind of helping to the exponential growth as well. So it is more to come, but this is just the beginning, I would say.
Okay. So, Kumar, I do have one question in my mind, and I'm sure a lot of folks have this in their minds as well. When we start thinking and talking about AI, it sounds amazing, right? It sounds very exciting. It sounds almost unbelievable at times. But there is also this fear or this feeling that AI is going to disrupt people. It is going to disrupt, it is going to displace the established practices and the processes. And then there's almost this sort of a fear in everybody's mind. What's going to happen next? Is AI going to take over? Let's start thinking about all of these sci-fi movies. Is there going to be a Skynet at some point?
It's kind of interesting. I was talking to my 18-year-old son over the weekend, and he's been big into robotics for the last 7 years, right? And when I say like big into robotics, it's basically building robots from scratch, right? His team kind of like, goes into the mechanical aspect of like, and even cutting down the steel, kind of like welding together and kind of like writing the firmware, the software for the robots to behave, right? So if you kind of like look into it and rewinding back like 30 years ago, the myth from Hollywood, from the movie Terminator or Skynet, right? It's all about like, the AI kind of like, taking over humanity. AI kind of like, disrupting our day-to-day lives. But my philosophy is like, if you look into it, is more in terms of people who embrace the AI technologies are really going to be like, the ones who are making progressive growth in future, and people who are going to be the laggers are going to be like left behind, right? So it's important to kind of like, embrace AI sooner than later. And it's going to be, it is a disruptive market, regardless, like, AI or cloud computing or like industry evolution. Either you disrupt or you're going to get disrupted, right? But definitely, AI is not going to be, displacing humankind or kind of like displacing, the work that humankind does, right? It is more like people who embrace AI are going to be like, displacing folks who are laggers and embracing AI. That's kind of like what we're going to be seeing. And AI is going to be more working hand in hand. We're already seeing like, Copilot, like, or some kind of a buddying system that kind of works with you, that is going to enhance your day-to-day, operations that you do in your life, whether you kind of like doing like mechanical operations, working in like in manufacturing, or you're doing like any kind of like intellectual development, where AI is going to be helping with generative AI is going to be helping you in that space, right? Enhance the efficiency, enhance like productivity, right? Enhance like, the go-to-market. So I think it's most important to kind of like know all these capabilities of AI and see how we can kind of like work hand in hand and complement each other and kind of like make our life productive on the workforce side. That's kind of what we're going to be seeing more, rather than saying like, AI is going to be displacing humankind.
Okay. So no fear of Skynet.
Well, at least not on my side.
When we talk about any specific industry segments, let's say manufacturing or financial services or retail for that matter, uh, what do you think? How is artificial intelligence going to help these industries, or is it already happening? Uh, Based on your experience, what do you think? Where are we right now, and where are we leading to?
In some industries have been, leveraging the AI capabilities even for the last decades, right? And it has been more in the back burner in terms of like doing predictive analysis, in terms of doing like pattern recognitions, in terms of doing classifications, and kind of like, using the data to see like what comes next. That's kind of like most about like generative AI, right? Pattern recognition and kind of like, projecting as to what is going to happen next, right? That's been happening for the last decade plus in a back burner. But now it's kind of like moved more into the prime time, where it's going to get a lot of visibility since like, ChatGPT. right? And each industry has been adapting, some form or other, the AI capabilities in terms of like the prediction, right? And I come from a retail background, I can speak to that a little bit more, right? In retail, if you look into it, massive retailers who's been in business for decades, right? And retail has taken a huge transformation in the last 20 plus years, since kind of like, Amazon gone, which is a complete different story, which we can talk about in a different session. But if you look into it, there is like, so much of like, retail historical information in the last 100 year plus, right? Since kind of like the border system evolved, right? There's like retail that happens like, at stores in terms of the POS registers, in terms of collecting the data of the day-to-day transactions. And then on another spectrum, in the last 20 years, where retail is more pivoted to, is the e-commerce side, where like, you and me constantly shopping online and our family shopping online, right? And that's all on the e-commerce side of business in terms of those transactions. But then everything between e-commerce and the POS registers, there's kind of like a huge kind of like, space over there where data is collected in form of like say the shipping, the packing, and the delivery, right, and from an e-commerce, right, and then that transaction being correlated to like the POS register transaction that goes off onto the store when you kind of like walk into the store based on your shopping habits. And then like there is merchandising, there is inventory handling, there's kind of like HR, financials, and vendor management, and so forth, right? If you look into retail itself, data sits in silos, right? And it's very important, number one, to bring that data into like one place and before you can start doing like any of those predictive modeling, right? Once you bring your e-commerce data from your .com, and then once you bring your POS register data, connect that with the loyalty of the customers, then you'll be able to do more of a predictive analysis in terms of your shopping habits, which we call like customer lineage, right? We'll be able to connect the dots and say like, okay, based on your family shopping habits and based on your shopping habits and like social media events that's coming up like in your geographic location like a sports game or stuff like that, maybe the odds are that you're going to be buying a sports apparel pretty soon for your son because you plan to visit a sports game, right? That is more of the pattern recognition and the predictive analysis, right? And that's been happening for a long time, right? Where we've been collecting data in a data warehouse and doing this predictive modeling. Now, AI kind of like really enables and amplifies that to the next level, right? That's why in terms of doing this predictive analysis, it's not going to take like months to run those models. Now it takes like hours to run those models using the LLMs and the SLMs that's already been developed, right? So that's kind of the transformation each industry is going to be going through in terms of like, where AI is going to really help to accelerate the go-to-market, right? The time to values can be significantly increased compared to what we've been doing in the last decade.
So my next point here is a little, it's a twofold question, and the context to this is in last, I would say 2 years plus, we have, really started looking at AI-based products and hearing and talking about a lot of new terminologies like large language models and generative AI and natural language processing and vector search and so on. And so many new things are happening almost on a daily basis. Uh, my first question is, are we evolving with AI or is AI evolving a little too quickly? And the second part to this is, if it is, how do we make sure that we have the proper security and the governance and the guardrails, so to say, to keep our growth in check while making sure that the productivity increases?
It's a
And
great question.
I'm sorry, just one more part to it. Are there any specific tools or products that you can share based on your experience, which really help in this process?
It's a great question, right? It is responsible development. It is responsible application on the technology side. Technology is to solve a business problem or a pain point. Technology should not be the pain point, right? And it's very important to kind of like, and then put some guardrails and safeguards in place for any technology as such. And, AI development, to your point, yes, is in a very exponential, accelerated fashion in terms of like, the new capabilities and the LLMs and, the algorithm that keeps coming up every day. It's very difficult to keep up with that, right? But how do you kind of really enforce and put governance into place? And it's every major software manufacturer's responsibility to start putting governance at that level, right? And who's got access to the LLMs, right? It becomes like even more of a geographic and political conversation when you talk about that, right? Should you kind of restrict the LLMs to specific continent or specific countries, right? And put the right guardrails in place as to who can leverage it. It is important to start thinking from that perspective because it is intellectual property, right? And most importantly, if you look into it, what really feeds the AI? And I touched upon it with my retail, example, right? It is data. Data is the fuel for AI. If you kind of take data out of the equation, pretty much you're operating in a vacuum, right? And you're talking about petabytes and exabytes of data that feeds into the AI calculations and for the modeling. And as you collect the data, there is so much of sensitivity around this data. So far, over the last few decades, we've been talking about only structured data, and that's been stored in different formats, like heterogeneous databases, whether it's going to be on-prem or in cloud. Now, the dimension for that data has changed. You're not only talking structured data, you're talking about unstructured data. Data that is stored in XML files, in HTML files or JSON or PDF or movies or images and audio files and whatnot, right? So there's a lot of unstructured data, but all this data does have a lot of sensitive information in them too, depending upon the line of business and what regulatory compliance each of these businesses have to adhere to, right? If you look into it, we are all familiar with PI data, which could be your data, my data, your address, your phone numbers, and you have PCI data, which is transactional for any financials, right? And then you kind of bring in healthcare into it. That's HIPAA guidelines. And then if you kind of talk geographically, there is CCPA and GDP or regulatory compliances too. All this is compliances that industries have to adhere to. And we have guardrails in place. But we need to ensure now, as you bring that data now for doing modeling, both structured and unstructured, that sensitive data has to be protected, right? Because now we are talking about one lake or in lake house or different terminologies, iceberg, whatever it is, right? But you're talking about structured and unstructured data that is stored in these centralized repositories, right? The beauty is that it is all stored in one format, which is kind of open file, whatever it is. But a lot of folks have access to that. A lot of personas have access to that. It could be the data scientist who's got access to the same information. It could be your data analyst. It could be your data engineers. It could be your data modelers, right? And this data stewardship was kind of accessing the data, right? It's important to put guardrails in place as to who can access to the data and what kind of information that they have access to, so that the sensitive information from a regulatory compliance when it comes to it, we have accountability and we have the right profiling and the safeguards in place so that we can protect the data, right? So as much as democratization of data is important, it's important to kind of establish the right level of data security and enterprise security against this data so that we can kind of ensure that none of this data has been compromised outside. So regarding your question about development tools and software, right? We've been very strategically positioned and aligned and partnered with some of the major software vendors, including Microsoft on the OpenAI space, especially on the Fabric platform adoption for ourselves internally at Prologis and for our customers. And similarly, we are also partnered with software vendor called Perforce Delphix. And Delphix is a great tool from a data compliance platform, and that kind of helps to put the right guardrails and safeguards in place when it comes down to data modeling and for data analytics, right, without compromising on the sensitive data that we talked about. And similarly, from a data integration standpoint, we are partnered with Boomi as our preferred data integration, software vendor, along with MuleSoft and other services in the iPaaS layer.
And these tools will provide us with the required security and governance so that there is enough opportunity to grow, but we also have the required guardrails in place.
Absolutely. These are, proven softwares and technologies out there in the market, and definitely seems to be trend setting in terms of solving some major business pain points across industries.
So Kumar, based on the work that we have been doing at Prelude, um, can you share some more insights about any specific use case or use cases that we might have worked on for a customer?
I can't share any specific customer, stories yet without their, validation. But definitely, I will be able to share our internal use case at Prelude, which is for our account management system. And we call this as drinking our own Kool-Aid, right? So this is kind of the journey that we undertook almost like a year ago, where we moved our workloads from Salesforce, Zogo, HR, financials, all the data into Microsoft Fabric only, right? And it was much, easy in terms of like using the data factory connectors to plug in and bring in the data into OneLake. Once we have the data, then we started kind of like, going through the data modernization journey in enforcing the data governance as to who can have access to the data and so forth using, Microsoft Fabric as well as like, the Delphix compliance tool. And then we started leveraging the data for doing modeling, right? And our model started to predict in terms of, how we could, forecast our revenue generation across like, the quarters for a given fiscal year. And our model started to do prediction in terms of, identifying customer churns, right? And then sort of like, doing recommendations in terms like, oh, we could mitigate this churns from happening again based on like, the customer stickiness, their adoption of the product services, and how we can kind of like, start looking at, the customer health information with a little bit more of a slice and dice, and where we should, invest further in terms of like, turning around that customer churn, possibly number one, into preventing the churn. And the next step in terms of like looking for opportunities for like cross-sell and upsell. But most importantly, enhancing the customer experience, right? So we have seen like, significant progress in terms of the data from this modeling for us to increase the revenues, cutting down churn, and kind of like doing the forecast for us so that we can be better aligned in providing the right level of services for our customers. So that use case is really beneficial. And similarly, like, the customers that we have onboarded onto the Fabric ecosystem are seeing like, similar business outcomes in their respective industries.
Okay. So in last 1 year or so, Kumar, um, there are thousands of new startups that have come up. Many new products, many new services. Most of them are based on AI, some sort of AI. And in this myriad of services, how do customers embrace and adopt AI, or if they have already started their journey, how do they navigate through this? Where do they go from here?
So you bring up an interesting point, and I was reading an article over the weekend, and it talked about the number of startup companies on the AI space, and the analyst, if they do the math, it's almost like one every hour, right? That's the number of AI startup companies that has evolved in the last year plus, right? And similarly, the technology is trying to keep up with that, and it's growing with that too, right? It's kind of a double-edged sword that we have. Um, it is interesting to kind of look at it from a customer standpoint, right? I would always look into it as to, build versus a buy. Do you want to build something within your organization, but when you have a major business problem to solve, do you want to kind of like build a new platform on a technology, or do you want to kind of like lean upon in terms of a proven technology out there in the market and bring that and integrate it and automate it and kind of like help to solve your business pain point? That increases the time to value, that increases the go-to-market strategy, right? And then definitely there's a quick ROI based on like, the investment that you make, right? So you wanted to consider, what kind of a culture that you have in an organization from a build versus a buy before you kind of like, lean upon and investing on software and technologies.
That brings to the end of this discussion for us today. Kumar, thank you very much for your time, knowledge, and experience that you shared with us. I know this was very useful to me, and I'm sure this is going to be very useful to many other people as well. To learn more about our service offerings and what we are doing at Prelude Systems, you can go to our website, which is www.preludesys.com, or you can also reach out to us at info@preludesys.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thanks for the opportunity.